meeting to order at 6:05. We have a new board member here. Hello, Ben.
Hey, everybody.
I'd like us to just quickly go around the table and have you introduce yourself since he wasn't able to make our first official meeting. So why don't we start with you, Tim?
Tim Bishop, representing Reading.
Mary Beth Banyo, Superintendent.
Paige Hiller.
Jennifer Tony Killington.
Jim Half, Killington.
Matthew Huff, Bridgewater.
Adam Emily, Reading.
Ben Ford, Woodstock.
Melina Egan, Woodstock.
Claire Trebek, Woodstock.
Liz Cody, Woodstock.
Morgan Saylor, Plymouth.
Jen Foster, Plymouth.
Pamela Fraser, Barnard.
Hattie Kuzmikas, Pomfret.
Joe Rigoli, I'm the Facilities Director.
Richard Seaman, Director of Finance and Operations.
And you've met Reena,
Yeah.
who is our right hand and left hand guru to help these meetings run smoothly. We have 2 amendments to add to the agenda. The first one is the status update on Barnard and the merger, which we sent you information so that you can, you would have read that over the weekend just to get yourselves kind of up to date with the conversations. Jennifer and I will review that later in this meeting, and then also to discuss, we're going to vote on ratifying the support staff contract as well tonight. I sent out both the teacher's contract and the support staff contract. I believe that the teacher's contract that you have now in your hands is the one that was corrected by our lawyers. Yes, Richard?
Yes.
Okay.
It's been accepted by both
Yes,
sides.
and that's been accepted by both parties. But when we did ratify that, we did not have copies sent out to all of our board members. Please keep in mind that those documents are confidential and should not be shared with non-board members. But it's really so that you can familiarize yourself with the contracts that we do have with both of our support staff and teachers. But as I said, tonight we'll be voting on the ratification of the support staff contract. Richard and I will go over what some of the changes were to be made to it. They were very small changes, mostly grammatical, to be quite honest with you. And it was really to extend the contract another year so that once the state decides on the healthcare benefits, then we can go into renegotiations for both support staff and teachers at the same time, same year. That's all I have to say now. Welcome, public. How are you? Thank you for coming. Does anybody have anything to add to our discussions tonight? Yep.
I just have a brief comment.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yep.
So my name's Melissa Fellows. I teach 7th grade science here at the middle school. And a point that I'd like you to consider tonight as you're evaluating the partnership with NUVU later this evening. I'd like to urge you to consider 2 points. And as context, I've taught 2 quarter-length electives in the lab this year. And last year, I also taught a several-month-long studio with NUVU. First, I feel that the success of learning in the Innovation Lab this school year depends largely on the opportunities facilitated by Max in particular. He's worked hard to support staff in their teaching and learning while simultaneously creating experiences for students together with teachers. I feel that it's important to evaluate the effectiveness of Max and his role separately from the partnership with NUVU. I have no idea how to do that, but I think it's important to consider. Secondly, it concerns me that this decision is being made with very little administrative observation, evaluation, and feedback of teaching and learning in the lab in that space. And as far as I know, student feedback has not been widely solicited, nor have other options really been considered. So I would urge you to look more deeply into evaluating our current program to make the best decision for our community moving forward.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else have any comments? All right, we'll move on. Board reports. Policy, do you want to report anything right now, or would you like to talk about policy when we go into line item 8?
I believe we have all the items in front of us, and just what we're going to be adding is that one of the other subjects that's coming up, I believe, in a little bit here is on school configurations, which this board, it may have changed with a few people, was put in charge of working on a configuration policy, and we have not gotten to it yet. It is finally on our agenda for this Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
We've been busy with the grading policy.
Okay.
You want to add anything, Pam?
But is it a configuration policy or it's a classroom size policy?
It's what we're calling either viability or sustainability. We haven't decided exactly if it's one policy or a couple policies or what it is, but it has to do with the conversation that we had in December after the Barnard vote and saying, well, let's work toward a voluntary merger and let's start with policy. So it's 3.5 months later. We haven't been able to get to it, but we are on Wednesday, 2 o'clock. And also we're going to be talking about life-threatening allergies and academic integrity soon too.
Great. I know that Bob was going to report on our configurations committee. Bryce, are you prepared to say anything, or?
Sure. Well, I see it.
Bryce, you're right.
I made it, barely. I mean, you guys do have this in front of you, which I think lays it out pretty well. I think the biggest takeaways, without having to go through this whole thing, is that we've been able to meet a few times, but there's some factors like the remediation efforts at the Prosper Valley School that have made us talk a lot about what we're going to be able to come to you guys with by June for kind of recommendations, which this speaks to a little bit. So we have had conversations around kind of ideal grade configurations, and we just had a presentation from Lee Sherwood on the middle high school proposal, which actually quite a few of you guys were at. But again, the charges that we were initially brought to us, I think certain things like the financing plan, for example, we're definitely not going to have any kind of final proposal for you guys here in a month and a half. It's going to be a long process, which is what we've spoken about. So I don't know if it's going to come down to this board deciding if we keep the current subcommittee as it is intact, or if the chairs will decide to go a different route. But I think, we know any of these plans, no matter what we decide, it's not a couple month thing, it's a couple year thing. So I'm not sure exactly what form that'll take, but we will have what we can for you guys by retreat time, and we'll just have to go from there.
And I will just add on to that for campus configurations. On May 6th, please mark your calendars. That's one of our workshops. And I know that the architect is going to also come to present his findings, as well as the facilities reports with Joe on the middle school, high school, the state of affairs with the middle school, high school. So that's an important meeting for all of you to kind of mark your calendars and to listen to that presentation. It will be really, really informational for us all, so that on June 1st at our retreat, we can talk further about some conceptual ideas on the facilities and maintenance of our buildings and how we want to move forward with each of our buildings and structures. So please mark your calendars for that. Did everybody receive one of these calendars so that we're all
Via
on,
email from Reena?
Yeah, so that we're all on the same page with kind of what the end of the year.
No, but they've come before. I mean, there was
They've
an
come
original
before.
one, and then there was an updated one. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed the updated one because it fell into the same conversation in my inbox. That's why I was confused. I thought we were meeting
But
last
just
week.
keep a lookout because we've really finalized kind of our dates. So we've got today, obviously, April 8th. We've got April 22nd, which will be another workshop. We've got the May 6th workshop. We've got a meeting here in the library, which will be a board meeting on May 13th. We have our retreat on June 1st. We have our June 3rd workshop, and then we have our final meeting of the year, which will be June 10th, where a lot of votes will be taking place on all of the work that we kind of pull together in these workshops. That will be our final voting date. So, yeah.
And can I just add, and we are going to have part of a meeting, the April 22nd meeting, because we're going to have to do some business, we think.
Correct.
Right,
There may
that-
be some business
and-
that we have to do as
And
well.
for members who have been on this board, we're trying a different tactic, which is to, all of us have complained over the years about, you sort of get this information a couple days before, and then we have sort of a quick discussion, and what can sometimes be a heated discussion, then we have to vote on it right away. And we've reflected back that doesn't give time for careful reflection and thought, and so what we're really going to try to do is present information oftentimes, and then since we're meeting on a more regular basis now every 2 weeks, then to look for the vote 2 weeks later. So it'll be a bit of a change if it works the way we want it to for board members.
And really our hopes is that if you did not get the answers to your questions, that you will have that ability within the 2-week period of time to reach out to Mary Beth, myself, and Jennifer to ask those questions for clarification if you don't have clarification on the topic. And as we said, we've got heavy things to talk about, and we want to be able to give them the time and the energy that each topic deserves. In our next workshop, Jennifer and I and Mary Beth and Richard and Sherry Souza went through kind of really what the board needs to work on over the next year and our goals, and started putting it to paper and working it into Mary Beth's active calendar so that all of us are accountable for what we want to achieve within the next year. It's really, really important that we stick to these conversations and don't get sidetracked into other things. So I will be sharing this kind of work paper with you in our next meeting. And then we will go through that as well as a full board so that you have an understanding of how that schedule works into the next year. And also in the process of, say, developing a budget, developing for negotiations, developing for campus configurations, and how we're going to all move forward as a whole. Because I think these pieces are really, really important to talk about. Especially when we start making really big decisions in the budget process. We don't want to be reactionary, we want to be proactive. And we find that we've been more reactionary to our conversations, which can lead to a lot of very intense moments. And we don't think that's necessary really, because I think we need to spend more time on what do we want to invest on, what is really important to us, and what is going to support both our profile of a graduate and those 5 cornerstones, as well as the strategic plan and supporting that as well. Okay, so that's my report. I'm done. Your turn.
Well, could
Yes.
I make a quick request?
Yeah.
Can you send out that dates email again? Because the only one I can find has the wrong dates, I think. Because it has
Okay.
last week listed as a meeting.
Reena,
For some reason, I
It's
can't find
probably
the other
nested
one.
or something. I'll send it out to you. It's also on our website.
Okay.
Can I also ask
Yes.
a quick new board member?
Yes.
When I see, like when committees meet to discuss different things, I understand anyone can go to those meetings.
Absolutely.
Is that right? Where would we find a list of when and where those meetings occur?
So they're not generally pre-planned. Usually a meeting is set at the end of a meeting for the next meeting, and minutes.
We have ours preset, right?
We do.
With the exception of Jim.
Yes.
Yes. It does change periodically, but
how
they're
would we know when those
posted.
meetings
They're
are?
posted in every school and in every town hall and on our website and in our foyer.
That's what I was wondering. So they're on the website.
But if push comes to shove and you're not sure about something,
Right.
Reena is the first person you should phone,
Okay.
and you should memorize her phone number.
Or
457-1213, extension 1080. And have it just ingrained in your head because she will be able to answer like every question.
Okay.
And if she can't, she'll get you the answer. So you can either shoot her an email or give her a call, but to me, she's the first person I go to if I have a question and don't know about a date or need one of your contact phone numbers and I can't find it anywhere. She's my go-to gal all the time. Sorry,
Yeah,
but she is.
I'm right there with you now.
Me too.
I think we have like a little triumvirate here that are all counting on Reena.
Yeah.
So Bryce, underneath item number 3 on your sheet here, can you actually send the information that you've worked on for that to policy? Because it's sort of the same.
This,
Is that exactly what you're coming up with? I mean, or is this just proposals?
no.
Or what data do you have to bring you this so it could bring us up to date? Because it's stating what grades pre-K through 3 and everything
Yeah.
else, and in policy, that's one of the things that we're actually looking at.
So,
And I would hate to us start coming up with something totally different without seeing what you
Yeah.
have.
yeah. So I'm sure we can get you all the
Yeah,
the
you can
materials
just
from that.
forward it to
Yeah.
Reena and Reena can forward it to the board,
Yeah.
the committee.
Real quick too.
Yep.
What about other committees? So we've had campus configuration that was told not to meet until we have a better, do we have updates about that? Not campus configuration,
I'm like, hold on.
community engagement.
Yeah, community engagement, I think that really what's going to happen is Jennifer and I have met, and our goals are that we first, as a board, come together and approve our profile of the graduate, as well as our strategic plan, our mission statement, and our preface to our strategic plan. All of that's going to happen on June 10th, where we vote on all those things. The workshops until June 10th are where we're going to have those conversations. We can also, in those conversations and workshops, start planning what is the community engagement committee going to start focusing on as well. I think that we need to come together as a group to start working on what are our goals now moving forward as July 1st comes into play, because that's our new fiscal year as well. Okay.
For finance, we are now looking, and I'm still looking for another person for finance. Nobody reached out to me that they wanted to join us, but I'll start hunting some of you down. So we need another person with us too.
And I have another person who I think would love to be on the communications committee, outreach committee, who has a lot of good skill sets that we could use as well. She's from Plymouth. Okay, any other questions? All right, now it's your turn.
All right, just a couple of celebrations to report. One over the weekend, some students in Shana Kolinsky's class were part of the Vermont State Math Fair. She had 13 of her 18 students attending, and very excited to report, and I understand the town of Killington is very
They
excited to
celebrated that
report
night.
that they had 5 projects in the competition, and in their division for 3rd and 4th graders, they took both 1st and 2nd place. So that's very
Wow.
exciting. Congratulations to Killington students. A couple other celebrations. Last week we had our 2nd annual Innovation Education Conference. And what was particularly exciting about this conference, we had a team of educators. It was our entire special education department actually present a strand at the conference, training other teachers in the area around best practices in special education. And I can tell you to the person that people were incredibly complimentary of our team. They actually brought folks out across the district and looked at classrooms and talked about a number of their innovative practices. So they put our district in a remarkably strong light, and I'd like to congratulate that team. And then finally, I'd like to also offer another kind of celebration of sorts with our teachers. As part of the conference, we had an action research evening, and about 50 teachers attended, showing the research they've been engaged in over the course of the year to solve complex problems in their practice. They had some very professional-looking products, lots of data to support their findings, and they were able to share with one another what they learned and how their practice is evolving. And I really would like to give a shout out for our entire staff that engaged in this particular experience. There are a number of different issues in your superintendent's report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that folks might have. Do you want to just go through? So very quickly, go through final school choice, or actually first thing you should be aware of is I have submitted and am submitting just a newspaper article to offer the sequence of portrait of a graduate, strategic plan, and the campus configuration, just to keep the communities up to speed, because there's a lot of puzzle pieces that are happening. Secondly, we finished our first round of school choice registration, and what we found is that there was a significant drop from last year. So, I think the board anticipated some of this, that the first time there were families that may be looking to move. We only had 4 requests during school choice time, and we have accepted those. Pre-K enrollment at Woodstock Elementary School. Pre-K is full, and we actually have 7 students on the waiting list. And then we have, right now, it has still been in-district registration, so families that come and partake in our pre-K programs that are out of district, that registration hasn't opened yet. But with in-district folks, Killington has 9 in-district students and Reading has 4 in-district students. So that process is continuing. Wanted to also just let the board know that part of my work is to continue to connect with the state legislatures, because a lot of what happens at the state level impacts us here. So we've had some breakfast meeting with legislatures. Our recent Vermont Superintendents Association had a luncheon meeting with a number of different legislators, and tomorrow we'll actually be having a regional superintendents meeting with state legislators to talk about a number of issues that are related to education. One that appears to be a fairly hot topic at the state level right now, and will most likely result in legislation before the close of the session, is testing for drinking water in schools. So you can anticipate that I will be coming forward to you with whatever it is that the state decides on that. One of the things that is happening in our Department of Instructional Technology is that I should offer a real sincere thanks to Candace Colburn, who has been our district-wide data manager. She has done a tremendous job. She's been a great asset for our district, and she is going to be retiring at the end of the school year. We have hired a new person. Her name is Sarah Cook, who has done some work at Operations for Tuck School of Business and has headed up data management before. She will be taking over for Candace, and we had structured it in such a way that there'll be some overlap between now and the end of the year, because there's a lot of cross-pollination that has to happen between those two. And then again, the instructor for instructional support services, she had shared a little bit more about the presentation that they gave. And I should quickly, Richard's here. Richard, any particular updates that you want to offer? In your packet is the summary of year-to-date expense in terms of the budget, and anything of note that you want to be sure the board is aware of?
No.
Okay. All the numbers are in your packet, if you have any questions regarding that. There's an update from Prosper Valley School, which Joe will be providing to us. School spotlights are there, and just upcoming district events.
Great. Anybody have any questions? Melina?
Yeah. In regards to pre-K enrollment, it says each program is able to accommodate 20 students in each program, so I'm assuming that Killington is able to accommodate 20, Reading 20, and Woodstock 20. And Woodstock is currently full with waiting lists. Is it first come, first serve? Is that how we do it?
Yeah, we do it first in terms of in-district and people that were already in the program, and then once that window closes, then we will offer an opportunity for people that are outside the district to come and participate in the program.
Okay. And so then those 7 in-district students who are on the waiting list, they don't go in, even though we're opening it out of district?
Well, we can open, so anybody that's coming in from out of district that would go on the waiting list behind those 7
Behind
folks.
those?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So then that would throw a question to me. How many students would you actually have to add another teacher for pre-K if we're trying to grow our first grade through high school, and we're going to limit it at 20? If you're at 20, you're going to be stopping families from moving into the town.
Yeah, so what you're looking at with pre-K is, one of the things you have to pay attention to is student-to-staff ratio when you have students at that age. So you can have you need to maintain a 1-to-10 ratio. And I would also add to that you really need a second adult in a pre-K classroom, little 3- and 4-year-olds. That's a support that's needed in the classroom. So, if you could open it up, we'd have to look at things like space and programming and that type of thing. West is relatively tight, but that is something that we could potentially look at. But I would say that, once it depends on, kind of what the cutoff would be, much like other classrooms, much like other elementary classrooms, how low would you want to go? But if the board wanted to consider that, that's something that you could look at in terms of opening up.
I guess my question is more of there's 7 children in Woodstock is what I'm hearing, and 10 is the ratio that you would need one more teacher and then one other parent. And then you open it up to outside enrollment. If there's 3 children from outside enrollment, that means the 10. Are we prepared to have 10 and hire on another staff? If we're here to try to grow our school altogether, it just seems to me by limiting it to 20. If you have 7, and that's what happened at one time in Killington.
Yeah, totally. Any of the teachers that we are keeping on at West have pre-K licenses?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's one of the challenges. We do not have the teachers that are in elementary teachers do not have the pre-K license. We have a very, very small pool of people that do have pre-K.
Can we look into what that cost would be, and if we could accommodate up to 30 kids? Because I tend to agree that we don't want to turn people away if we don't have to, especially if we're.
Are there other schools within Woodstock? I know Rainbow Play School, for example.
Yeah, so
in
terms of the state, how does that work?
What happens to the 7?
Yeah.
The
way that it's structured, pre-K is a fairly complex program, but there are universal pre-K dollars that people can use both within a public pre-K learning experience or any program that has been certified by the state. So in Woodstock, we have the program at Woodstock Elementary School, but there are also a number of private programs that people can attend. And so this has been a fairly large jump from last year with an interest in that program. We have made our program full day and at no charge, so that may very well be related to that decision.
Bryce?
I would just encourage you to talk to Hannah and Vic and Barnard, because it's not just that. With the licensing, like, we had to go jump through some things to move from 20 kids to 25. It was a different license. Mm-hmm. So it's not as simple as just adding a teacher and getting the 10 kids, but I don't know all that was involved. I just know we had to take some steps just to get them to bump it from 20 to 25. We couldn't just do the flat. So I'm not sure what all those, but I know that they did the research and had to deal with the whatever entity is in charge of that to get that change in Barnard to 25. So.
Can we just explore that?
Yeah, I will
and
explore
then just
that and report back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I, relatedly, a question about, so I know we're talking about after-school programming later.
Yes.
That's somewhere on the agenda. Personally, for our family, entering pre-K is also dependent on, will after-school programming be present and allow for a 4-year-old? And I think that's a big, amount of information for families to have about deciding if they're going to enroll in a certain school, if they have to pick up at 2:30 every day, it makes a big difference versus even if it is full day, it's still 2:30, right? So if part of the hope of having better understanding what after-school programs going to look like, how do we advertise and market that this is what pre-K looks like in the WCUD district, right? So it starts at this, it includes after-school programming, they can be there until this time.
Right, and we'll definitely unpack that a little bit more later in the meeting. It's a complex issue, but I think that there is a broad understanding that quality after-school pre-K programming for parents is a really important piece.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. Consent agenda, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Pamela?
Second.
Thanks, Jim. Any questions on the consent agenda before we move on?
Just the excursion.
Garen, can you speak to the excursion, please?
Yeah, this is an excursion that has happened before, so this is to the festival in Connecticut, right? Is that Stratford, Connecticut? So, as you can see, it's for the Yo Masters, which are the students who have been in the program and done multiple performances, so this is kind of both an educational experience and a celebration experience to go forward. But again, one we've done before with high success, and you can see the itinerary is in there.
Any other questions? All those in favor of the motion on the table,
Wait,
please
I'm
say.
sorry. Didn't it say Ontario? It's
Oh, Stratford, Ontario.
Yeah.
So that's why I paused a moment. Thanks for catching that one.
driver.
No, it's that way. Pull out the cell phones.
You good now? Yeah. Okay. All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, the ayes have it, the motion is passed. Time schedule appointments. Joe, we're gonna, the other thing I want to approve as well right now is the ratification of the support staff contract. Patty, Melina, and myself met with the support staff. When we had originally negotiated this contract, we had hoped for multi-year negotiations and contract. That did not come to fruition, so it was signed for 1 year. The purpose of us meeting again not only was that we had to negotiate for the following year, but our goal was to just extend the contract without any changes to the changes that we had already previously made. The teachers did agree to that. There were some clerical changes that needed to be made. One, because the support staff's union had decided to also include the support staff from Barnard in this contract. So we had to make some clerical changes in the contract because previously it had not included Barnard in that language. Everything else remained the same. They accepted the 2.5 increase in their salaries. And so we have decided to agree to an extended year contract. We will have to go back to the table starting next fall, early year next year. But we're waiting to hear what the state has determined will be the healthcare benefits for all teachers and support staff, so that part of our negotiations will be taken off the table in future negotiations. So really it's, do I have a motion on the table to approve the support staff contract that just...
So moved.
Thank you, Jim.
Extends the term.
Extends the term, correct. Do we have a second?
Bryce.
Thank you, Bryce. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. Barnard will have to take that contract to your individual board to approve it as well.
Yep.
Okay, just want to make sure you are aware of that. Okay, moving on. Joe, update on engineering studies?
Sure. So Fred McKnight of Turner Building Science and Sean Kelly of Sanborn Head Engineering completed their studies at Prosper Valley. And they've made some recommendations. The recommendations are pretty much along the lines that we have been discussing for the past few months here. They suggest that we install a sub-slab depressurization system to hopefully limit the amount of, or the migration of water vapor that's underneath the slab that's into the building. So what it would do, it actually lowers the pressure enough so that that water vapor that's trapped underneath won't come up into the building, but will be piped out of the building. What they'll do is drill about a 4-inch hole through the slab. They're recommending that we put 3 of these in the building, and it should cover about a 50-foot radius each. That 4-inch hole in the slab will be vented out through the roof by a fan, and hopefully that'll also double by drawing out some of that moisture that might be underneath the slab. There is moisture, it's moisture vapor, and hopefully that'll dry out that sand layer beneath that. What I'd like to do is install that system as soon as possible and monitor it for the next few months. We have relative humidity sensors in the slab as it is right now, and I'd like to watch those for a month or two and see if the system actually works. If it drops it below 95 relative humidity in that slab, I'd be confident in putting down a flooring material that shouldn't give us problems. They've also suggested that we install dehumidifiers. They said that we would just need a portable industrial type dehumidifiers that we can place throughout the building like the ServPro would use or something. They also said that if we ever get to the point where we're going to do some work on the HVAC system, we should just install it into the HVAC system. I would steer you folks into possibly just putting it into the HVAC system now rather than buy these portable ones. I think it'll be a disruption to have those things in the school, especially if they had to run during daytime. We get a humid snap in May or something, we have to put them in. And then I'd have to figure out exactly, they have to drain. We'd have to access drains, and I just think they'd be disruptive. But it's a cost-effective way of doing it. It would be, I would assume, from what I came up with, about 5 units, and they about $2,000 each, so that's $10,000 as compared to installing a unit on the HVAC system, which I haven't gotten a price for. We're waiting for the engineer to get back, but I'm guessing around $40,000. They've also suggested that we repair the footing drains. After we dug around, you saw in the last report, we realized that it was just the cleanouts to the system that were actually clogged. They had come disconnected from the actual footing drain system themselves. Dirt fell in and they've been clogged. So they suggested that we repair all those cleanouts. I feel that we can save a majority of our money by not replacing the complete system. I think we can water jet whatever debris is in that system out and just repair the cleanouts, and I think we'd be all right. They've suggested that if we felt it was necessary, waterproofing the foundation. If we were going to go ahead with waterproofing the foundation, we would have to dig up the foundation around the entire building. That would consist of removing all the sidewalks, all the cement, all the overhangs around that building. If we didn't do that, we'd save around $70,000. I found monitoring the RH meters, the relative humidity meters, around the outside of the building I had in place as well as the inside. And you saw on the map, most of the moisture is concentrated in the center of the building. The outside perimeter of the building seems to be fairly dry. The building's been functioning for almost 30 years without a coating, so that's an option that we might want to think about. They've also suggested that we replace any flooring in that school with a permeable flooring. Right now, the flooring that we have down is linoleum or VCT, which is tile, and that's not permeable. Moisture vapor that's trapped beneath the slab can't escape up into the building, and that's kind of what we want it to do. Any remaining moisture that the sub-slab depressurization system doesn't get rid of is going to want to come up through the slab, get into the building, and we need to suck that out and get it out into the atmosphere. If that depressurization doesn't work and it doesn't drop the relative humidity low enough to where carpet tile will stick to the floor, the option that we have, which was included in the last bid we have to replace the flooring, would be to seal the floor entirely with an epoxy sealer. That's a $40,000 ticket price. So I'm really banking on this depressurization system, which is kind of like a radon mitigation system, if anybody's noticed what that is. It just removes vapor. So, but I would ask of you folks tonight is to okay funding, which would be about $7,500 for me to install this system and then monitor it now through the spring when it's a good time to do that. It's extremely wet out there, and see what happens.
So do I have a motion on the table to approve the $7,500?
Can we ask questions?
Well, we get the motion
We
first.
have to make the motion first.
Discuss it.
Sure.
So moved.
Thank you, Lou. Do I have a second?
Second.
Pick. Bob or Tim? Okay, now, any questions? Go ahead.
I do.
Okay.
So I work in construction. I'm on your side. I understand. I would urge you to be cautious with the sealing of the floor. I know from personal experience it sticks for a while, but if the water does come back, it is going to slowly push that sealant up. Sealing the outside, I know it's a huge bill. I've worked around a lot of foundations, and if none of these other things work, a lot of the water that is coming in through this, I mean, you probably know it's everywhere in that slab.
Sure.
Do you think that 3 holes are enough?
Yeah, we did some communication tests where we drilled through the slab and we hooked up a vacuum, and then we drilled holes periodically out throughout the building and monitored the pressure that was being drawn through that vacuum. And we had really good communication. We had up to about 70 feet communication throughout the building from this one vacuum port that we had. So these 3 would cover about 50 feet each,
Okay.
And that should cover a majority of the building.
So you talk about the fan, right? You know,
Correct. Yep.
sucking it up. Is this going to be on some sort of like its own sensor, or does
They
or
run
do you have to
constantly.
go there and flip it on
No,
when the
they
humidity?
run constantly,
It's gonna run
and they'll be
constantly.
placed, yep, and they'll be placed, we've had a few locations, they'll be placed in closets, so they'll be out of sight, you won't see them, and they'll be ported up through the roof.
Okay.
I agree with you, in a perfect world, I'd love to coat the foundation. They coat foundations in a desert, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this will work, and if it drops it down enough, I think we should. The folks who would like to apply the epoxy to the floor, they have a guarantee. They say that they would replace labor and material for the flooring only. So it wouldn't necessarily include any built-ins that we had in there if moisture was able to come through. So yeah, there's a caveat there with sealing that floor. After speaking to these engineers, it doesn't seem like there's a huge amount of water beneath this building. There's no standing water, and it seems to be concentrated into the center of the building. So I'm hoping.
I would urge you to cautiously look at that. Like I know for a fact, I know the guy that built the barn down the road.
Yeah.
He's worked in that valley. It's filled with water.
Yeah.
It's filled with it. I mean, it just,
We had the same issue. I spoke to Bob Harrington, who's an engineer in Pomfret, and he did the firehouse, and he indicated to me the same thing. They wound up putting floor drains underneath there. Yeah, but we found no standing water. I actually have monitoring wells in the slab now, and they're dry.
what's
So-
the sign?
Yeah, the vapor barrier's there. It seems to work. The moisture above the vapor barrier is at about 3%. Below that is 6%. But they seem to think that they couldn't nail it down exactly where this moisture was coming from, but they just think that vapor barrier has been damaged somehow. Not necessarily completely, but in certain areas.
My last question. Do you think it is advantageous to have 1, 2 maybe portable?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. A few of the recommendations that I'd like to do on a side note here, I'd like to remove the landscape around the building completely because it's graded improperly.
Thank you.
We have landscaping in front that's mounted up so all the water sits against it. So I'd like to regrade it and bring it away from the building. I'd also like to install a second daylight on our footing drain system. We only have one, and that clogged up pretty quick. I'd also like to keep 1 or 2 standby portable dehumidifiers just to have on hand. And finally, the last thing I'd like to do is put in a yard box. We have a couple valleys on that roof where all the water from about 2,000 square feet ends up in one spot. So what I'd like to put a drain, culvert drain there, and pipe it out, either attach it to the footing drains or pipe it out and get rid of it. Try to move that water as quickly as possible away from the building.
And when you talk about all these things, are all of these things that you, or I don't know if you have anybody that works for you, are doing, or are they subcontracted?
No, everything will be subcontracted out. We have nothing in-house that do this kind of heavy work. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jim?
So you're just looking for $7,500 for a slab depressurization system?
Yeah.
That's all?
For the time being, yep.
Can you tell me where we are on what the board approved at the last time in expenditures, and is there any money left over from that?
Sure. You guys gave us $25,000 for the engineering, and we've spent that on the 3 engineers. The only engineer I don't have a report back yet from, and it should be, because he just received, the other ones would be the mechanical engineer, and he's going to give us the size of dehumidification unit that we would need to install on our HVAC system.
Okay, and this, you need the $7,500 so you can figure out where you're gonna go from there after.
Correct. It just
So
makes
all this other stuff is nothing right now. It's
nothing. What I want to do is
$7,500 to
take
get
that
this,
one step.
to point you to the rest of the directions.
Correct. Because if this works, it'll answer a lot of things.
So I'm good with, that's all I need to know. $7,500 to find out.
Yep.
For an investment that's, I don't know what they spent.
Hundreds of
over there.
thousands, sure.
Okay.
Jennifer?
That was my question.
Do we have any, Lou?
And so the next series of steps that you listed a couple things, like how much are we looking at there? Like what's the cost we're looking at to finish the project, assuming this step is successful?
I don't have solid numbers on those. We've gotten general numbers to repair the...
Ballpark, what do you think?
Yeah, ballpark, if we had to do the complete footing drain system, we were looking at about $60,000. If we have to replace all that concrete sidewalk, which we could and could not do, we could leave some of it off.
Basically what I'm saying is, if this works,
Yep.
what do you think we're in for, right? Let's assume the positive.
If it works.
When you say we're in for, do you mean to reopen the school?
Yes, that's what I mean.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So where I'm standing right now
Let me
is,
answer that.
well, I was gonna say, it's $7,500 to get the right answer. We're not here for guesses.
I guess what you're looking for, Lou, there, when we did the presentation on this several months ago, we were up in the 400 to 500 range, which included drains, landscaping, moving the water away, sealing the floor, all new flooring throughout, all new cabinetry throughout, because a lot of the cabinetry also has mold growing in it. We're still in that same ballpark. What this 7,500 is going to tell us, I think it's going to increase the likelihood of success. If we can begin to get that moisture out underneath, we've got a much better idea of how much is going to continue to move up into the air.
Yeah, I have no problem with 7,500. I just want to understand, like, if this works, what are we in for next, right? Just, not that I have a problem with it, but, you know, as a board, we don't have a lot of money to spend, so we should know, like, pending success here, what are we gonna have to invest in this site to bring it back to where we can put students in it?
I think, just as Richard indicated, we're probably right where we were before. If we left off a few things here, we're right around the $400,000 mark.
So this is basically answering the question, is it gonna work or not? Because we're still at that point where we're not, like,
Correct.
guaranteed that,
Yes.
you know, we can't stop the water, right? For
Correct.
whatever reason, we keep getting water.
We do, and these guys were unable to pinpoint an exact reason why it's there. And it's most likely pointed to the vapor barrier has failed. There's a huge amount of pressure. We sit right in that valley, and we know that. And there's water pressure pushing up from underneath. And like I said, it seems to be centered just in the middle of the building.
Okay.
If that's the case, Richard, Joe, it would be helpful. It would be helpful to see that number in some detail, or as much detail as you know. I know it's a prediction; it's an estimate.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm still not clear on whether we're still ripping out every cabinet. You know, we're sealing or not sealing. So some of these things, like sealing or not sealing, seems to be dependent upon not the 7,500. I'm saying it would be helpful to have a global prediction, if that's what we can get. The committee that I chair or co-chair,
sure,
would be helpful to have this, because we're supposed to be specifically looking at this project and coming back to the board with a recommendation.
Yep.
So
we can update, Bob, what we had put together before with new information, new knowledge.
My understanding was we were not in the, we wouldn't be, if this was successful, we wouldn't be in that 450,000. So it'd be helpful to have more precise.
Again, part of what Joe said tonight is if we don't go down and dig out and waterproof the foundation, you save a significant amount of money. We have a recommendation that says you really ought to do that. So we've got to go through, so we can price the components, then ultimately we'll have to figure out which of those components do we want to go forward with so as to get the highest likelihood of this not recurring again.
Maybe
But
to
just-
break into just two numbers. I mean, we have the one scenario where you don't see the floors, or to dig up the outside, and the scenario where we maybe have to do that.
But
saving
I think
the
right
high
now,
low.
we're a little bit premature in the conversation,
We'll
because
update
the
the
vote
components.
tonight on the table is the $7,500 that will lead us to a better idea of what that conversation should be for the future of that school in particular. So do we have any other questions? All those in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, the
Hey,
motion is
just-
passed.
Just, I appreciate the continued work on this project,
Oh, yeah.
as does the town of Pomfret.
No pressure with both of us sitting there.
Somebody's gonna have to do something.
Poor Jeff's over here.
You want me to present? Okay. So we're going to talk about Barnard. I received some requests from both new members and previous members on the board on just updating us where we stand on our Barnard vote that was made, I believe, in October.
December.
Thank you, December of 2018. We as a full board had voted not to forcibly move Barnard into our district. We felt that it was very important for us to work together to move them into the district on a collaborative and friendly process. Corinne, who is the chair of the Barnard board, Jennifer, myself, and Mary Beth met before the vote, and the things that were really important to Barnard were continuing a pre-K program throughout the entire district, because they saw the success of their program in Barnard, and they felt very strongly that if we could somehow replicate that throughout the entire district, that was a really important topic for them. Since becoming a policy-driven board, we also decided that instead of going into the Articles of Agreement and changing things there first and foremost, that we needed to write a policy on school sustainability or viability, whatever the wording is, and classroom configurations. The policy committee right now is starting to work on classroom configurations and school sustainability. It is something that we need them to work furiously upon so that we can present that to Barnard as well. Our hopes are that everybody will agree upon that policy, and that's one reason that Pamela is part of that process, so that it's a collaborative process between the Barnard reps as well with our new district reps. And that's what we really looked at.
And I'll give a little bit of background for those of you who are new on the board. I sat on the several-year-long committee, along with several of you, the Act 46 committee, and Barnard was an important part of that conversation, and discussions about classroom configuration were an important part of that decision. And a little reminder, and if you weren't on the school board, you might not have been following it as closely back then, but basically all the towns in the district voted on the same Articles of Agreement. And so Barnard was the only town that did not vote to come in based on those Articles of Agreement. Part of those, and where Corinne's, where she's troubled is the idea, the classroom configuration and then the school closure. So she had suggested that what we could do, is amend those Articles of Agreement and then Barnard might be willing to come in voluntarily. And Paige and I felt pretty strongly that that was what the rest of the towns voted on. And so to now change those, you know, I didn't really think was fair, because that was what all the other towns voted on, and that's the presumption under which they came in. But, you know, we have a different landscape. I mean, things have changed over the last year and a half, certainly almost 2 years. And, you know, we definitely think we can come to a place in policy where Barnard should be able to be very comfortable with what our policies are regarding classroom size, classroom configuration, and school closure. And we wanted to address it that way instead of asking everybody to re-vote or to change these articles of agreement. And it's a little, you know, I mean, Pamela's the most expert in it, but truly, you know, the state has been, was it in November that the state
final plan?
The final plan came out in November, which said that Barnard had to join us. No, okay, so.
Well, let's not put
okay.
words.
So it said,
because of the MUD, there's 5 MUDs in the state, because in 5 different unions, only one town stayed out, so there's 5. And in MUDs, so they're different. The state cannot force merger because of the union high school arrangement, something very long and complex.
Yeah.
So in the case of MUDs, the state can only recommend that a unified board force annex a district that's a non-member like us. So, so yeah, the report says that they recommend that you do that.
Jim?
We had a vote as a board, and there's only a few new members here, and it was back in November.
December.
And
it was
well, it
unanimous.
started in November, okay? It ended up for a vote in December. It's been passed on to policy. I know that we're talking about today, having discussion on this. I please just wish, if this ever does get to a vote before policy comes out, that we just stick to what the board said before. We don't want to go into a marriage with someone that doesn't want to be with us. We want to work it through policy, and I believe Pamela and I and Lou are working. You know, we've already had discussions on certain things, individual items. We just haven't had it on the agenda at this time. So if it does come to a vote, I'm just asking you folks to please stick to the vote that was set the last time. You never want somebody in bed with you that doesn't want to be there.
And I agree with that, but I think there are new members, and there's an idea that everybody's got to be brought up to speed as to where we are. There has been a decision not to have any extension. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
So H39 is the bill that went through the House, and then when it went to the Senate, it was changed a whole bunch, and now it's in conference committee, and it's supposed to be decided by the end of the week or the beginning of next week.
About whether or not to just extend
and that's
any deadline.
only a bill. Yeah, sorry, I didn't say what it was. It's only for the districts that are forced, and that's not us. There's like 30 or something that are not in a position to do anything but be forced according to the state. And so that bill would give them another year to organize, basically, but they have to agree to merge, but they just get an extra year. So it's an extension. And I forgot which is which, but in one body they said that's great, and the other they said no, or it's different. They're figuring it out. So, but if we were going to stick to what we voted on in December, it wouldn't be relevant to us because we've already decided to pursue this voluntary path that is separate from. It's a 721. Thank you. A 721 type merger. That is outside of the Act 46 process. So as I was watching that H39 unfold, I just felt like, doesn't really matter to me what happens since we're doing this other thing. So
nothing has changed. The deadline is still the same that we had to vote in December.
And I do want to just say that well, first of all, I was just so pleased after being so involved with this issue for so many years, and and frankly not really loving the original merger agreement for the reasons that you just articulated, and then finding like, wow, we are coming to common ground. So after December, or at that meeting, I just was thrilled that we had found some common ground and that all of the issues that that had been a struggle were seemingly dissipating, and like we were going to make something work out. And I hope that's still the case. I really, really do. And you know, the legal counsel's update doesn't make sense, as I spoke with you about it. He says this is updates. There's new information. He doesn't mention H39, and he shares with us a few pages from a report that is 4 or 5 months old, that we already knew about, and we actually based our conversation in December on. So it's a little questionable. I don't know where he's coming from with his update.
Hold on 1 second, Patty?
So I guess I just want to, I think in my mind, voting in December, I fully appreciate the policy hasn't been able to get us to the place we wanted. I would have thought by the date, I think I assumed when we voted in December, we would have come to a mutual agreement by this date, and we wouldn't be faced with this question. So that's one way that I look at it. The other way I think that I want to make sure I have clarity around is, you know, who becomes responsible for the vote for Barnard ultimately coming in before July 1st and after July 1st, and so what are the ramifications of that, and potential outcomes of that for us. And if, heaven forbid, because I always have to think about the worst case scenario, we don't come to a mutual agreement, something, you know, we can't come to a policy that is something that is tolerable to Barnard, and they decide now we're not going to want to do this, and then they vote not to, then what happens? So they stand as a standalone elementary school long term. I'm asking these questions for clarity, for me who's been through this for all this time, and then also for the new people, because it is a very confusing issue. Because I think there's a consequence if we don't get a resolution on this. My understanding is we stand with Barnard having equal amounts of votes for our for the central office stuff as the whole board does. We become no. Okay, so that's
so let me just.
There's a lot of stuff.
Let me just clarify.
Well, because they're
some
important
things.
questions.
So the full board, and you guys chime in if I'm wrong legally, but if the full board decides that they want to re-vote for a forced merger, that has to happen before July 1st, 2019.
Sorry, and it's not just a board vote. The board would be voting to hold an elected
Correct.
vote.
Right.
Of all of the towns.
That's what I'm saying. Let me finish though.
Yep.
If we vote yes, that we've changed our minds, then we have to hold a special election amongst the towns, including Barnard, to vote yes to accept Barnard into the district. That has to happen before the July 1st deadline.
Unless this bill changes.
Correct, unless we are extended and have a bigger grace period. If we decide to honor what we voted on, then what happens is that after June 30th, 2019, going into July 1st, then Barnard becomes responsible for passing that vote in Barnard only to vote yes to join the new district.
I don't think it needs to wait till after. It could be at any time.
But after July 1st, we no longer.
The rest of the towns
but
don't have
Barnard
any
could initiate the process
Sooner.
sooner.
But we no longer have any weight in that conversation after June 30th, 2019. Bryce.
Just to add on to that, so it would have to be Barnard that would initiate it, but then it would still then come to this group that would then choose to.
Yes.
I'm not go to the full town vote like we're talking about anyway. So it doesn't really change that. I just wanted to say something from a very broad view, kind of more what Jim was saying. I mean, when this board voted to not force annex Barnard, we did bring that up at town meeting, both the selectmen and the school board, and I just want to point out for many of you who weren't there, how much better it made the townspeople that were there at town meeting feel. I think with anybody in life situation, or if you have kids or anything, when you're being forced, it's not always an easy situation, so I think for some members of town for sure, just knowing that, okay, well, we're not going to be forced now, and that you guys kind of respected that. I think, lightened the air a little bit. And I think some are more willing to feel like, okay, well, at least now we're having this conversation. And I do think there may very well be much more of a willingness to join later this year. So I just want to emphasize that I really do appreciate that. And I think that we are working in a very positive way right now. With our involvement on this board, and I hope that can remain. And I think anything to the contrary would then just again become a force in a town not wanting to be forced, that then could drag out another year if this bill goes through because of the legal battle and stuff. And I was hoping to kind of skirt all that if possible.
Claire? Yeah, I think I'm just confused about what are the implications on the district, sort of the district-wide implications and the implication on the unified district with both scenarios, whether Barnard stays its own Barnard Elementary School district versus joining the unified district.
So Mary Beth is going to answer that question for you.
Okay, and I'm going to answer
And then
part
Bob,
of
I'll
it,
get to you
and then
afterwards.
Richard, I'm going to ask you to speak to the financial aspect of it. So it has to do with the structure, the governance structure. So currently we operate where we have the MUD board, this board. We have Barnard Academy, and then the overarching umbrella is the Windsor Central Supervisory Union. And we have Pittsfield hanging out there as well in a kind of a unique situation. So if Barnard were not to join, this governance structure continues the way it currently is. One of the things that has been happening to date is I think that there's been this assumption that parties are working to make the merger happen. So have we technically been running, going through line by line, like what's the responsibility of a supervisory union versus a district, and going through each item that might come up on the board? We haven't been doing that. We've been kind of saying, okay, it's likely that this is going to happen. If it were to be a long-term circumstance, we would have to kind of restructure things. So we have the Windsor Central Supervisory Union Board, and that board is responsible for curriculum, it's responsible for buildings and maintenance, wherever we decide to put that, transportation, special education, and then we get out of that board meeting and then come and say, okay, what is the merged board responsible for? So we'd have to get better about designating what comes under the supervisory union. And that is actually outlined by law, like what categories of things need to go under the supervisory union, and then what kinds of things this merged district would be deciding. And then Barnard would decide things similarly for their school. So that's the governance structure. There is also some pretty significant implications related to budget, and Richard, I'll let you speak to that.
Well, I mean, in many ways, you touched on that. So right now, what we have is we've got the MUD budget, we've got the SU budget, and then Barnard does their own budget just for their elementary school. What we hope, I think, as an administration, from a curriculum, from an education point of view, is that the decisions made by the Barnard board as relates to their elementary students is consistent with what is being made for all of our other elementary schools. There are some challenges in there because Barnard, being a smaller budget and depending on what's going on, may have budget pressures, did this year have budget pressures where there have been slight changes in the makeup and the curriculum being offered at Barnard that are a little bit different than those offered at the elementary school. Meaningful? Probably not, but this is the challenge of running all of our elementary schools under one heading over here and then having Barnard running it over there. Challenge number one. Challenge number two is trying to be sure that if we're utilizing resources that are being paid for by the MUD, and let's understand in the MUD, because we have a MUD, we have to break it out between elementary expenses and high school expenses. And what we need to be sure is anything we have in the high school, or because Barnard pays for their fair share of the high school, they do not pay for anything that's related to the elementary school of that budget because they have their own. And this year, for example, we pulled some expenses back into the SU in order for those expenses to be shared across all of the entities. And we just need to be sure that if we're sending Joe up to Barnard, that Barnard is paying their fair share of that. I think that, that's only fair. And we're getting better at that, but wherever that goes along, we need to be sure that the expense sharing is consistent. So it's not being covered by the MUD and Barnard's benefiting from it, or for that matter, Barnard's paying for it and the MUD is benefiting from it. So just from an ease of understanding, from a simpler structure in budgeting, in how we utilize the resources, our ability to be able to move resources from building to building. Right now, we can move someone from Killington to West to Reading, and there's no issue. It's all within the same budget. As soon as we take that and go over to Barnard, then there's an issue, because now we're out into a different budget, different dollars, different pieces to it. So there's no doubt it's easier from an administrative point of view, from a budgeting point of view, to have these brought together so that we can make it consistent across all of the different components. It also ultimately, if we can resolve how Pittsfield is being handled by the state, allows us to go from currently 4 entities, an SU, a MUD, Barnard, and Pittsfield, potentially go down to a single entity, single budget, single entity, single board. So it does make it easier from that side, as Mary Beth was touching on, from a government's point of view. Those are part of the administrative side. It does not address the town issue. It does not address the emotional side or the control side or any of that. It's purely from an administrative, from a budgeting perspective.
Right?
I just wanted to add on that note when we talked about shifting teachers and stuff. Just that's one reason the Barnard board did vote this year to fall in line and use the exact same teacher and administrative contract. So the teachers are all on the same scale and stuff, so we don't have to worry about those types of issues. And that's all the same whether if we join.
Melena had her hand up.
I was just going to mention teacher contracts, and that was something we experienced under this contract and getting everybody on one contract, but Barnard was negotiating separate but same, and it worked out well because we had a good relationship, and it but that's also something that you need to consider.
Lou, sorry, I'll go to you, Bob.
So for everybody that's new on the board, this has clearly been a long and ongoing issue that we've had to discuss. I would say it's probably fair to open up the issue and discuss it again for new board members. However, I would say that the position the board came up with was absolutely the right one, and that there's a right way to do this and a wrong way to do this. And if we force a merger, that is, or annex Barnard, that is the wrong way to have a positive long-term relationship. And I think we're already seeing the fruits of approaching it in a different way, right? We're approaching it as more of a partnership and figuring out what the problems were and solving some of those. The policy committee can certainly solve some of that. Hopefully we can do that pretty quick, and put this all behind us as a group, and have our friends and neighbors all get along.
Well, and the nice thing about the policy as well is it will be district-wide. It's not just solely for Barnard's benefit. It really is, we needed this policy to be discussed anyway, and to make it district-wide so that there was equity throughout the entire district with an understanding of how are these schools going to be sustainable, and what are the guidelines to look at so that every school is treated equally in those considerations in the future. So I think it was a pro. Bob?
I just want to ask the question. I thought I read, is there any consequence to your small schools grants as a result of not getting in?
There's something in H39 for the non-MUDs that might happen, but it wouldn't affect us. I have Corinne's letter.
Yes, why don't you read Corinne's letter, and then I think if there's no other questions, I think we can wrap up this conversation. We can always continue it. If people find that they didn't get enough clarification, you can send your questions to Mary Beth, to myself, to Richard, to Jennifer for clarifications, because I know it's a hot topic. It's a complicated topic as well, and there's so much information that comes from so many different resources, and they don't always align with each other. So anyway, you're going to read Corinne's letter.
Right, so Corinne is the chair of the Barnard School Board, and she couldn't be here tonight, so she had sent an email to Paige, and I'm going to read it. And if she doesn't, I didn't actually read it thoroughly, I just glanced at it. If she doesn't mention timelines, which I don't, I think she does. If she doesn't, I will answer what your question was. Hello, WCUD, which I'm still not comfortable saying. Hello, WCUD board members. Thank you to Paige for including me in this update conversation so that new board members have a chance to hear Barnard's perspective and intentions in cooperation with your board. The Barnard board and electorate greatly appreciated your board's unanimous December vote and our dual decision to pursue a voluntary path towards merger governed by VSA 721, as it sets the stage for a mutually respectful and democratic path forward. It also disengages us from the uncertain state-level legislative and legal movements prioritizing autonomous local relationship building, which we believe is crucial for a productive and effective board. We are pleased at the movement of the MUD district to public PreK offerings. We share the commitment to such a crucial investment in early education and would not want to put our program at risk in a merger without what happened, without the change. We look forward to your policy committee's policy formation regarding school closure and reconfiguration, as we anticipate it will address the concerns of Barnard voters regarding the sustainability of thriving community schools under consolidated governance. When Barnard town members inquired about merger activity at town meeting, we informed them that we maintained our commitment to work with the MUD board toward a new merger proposal that may address Barnard's concerns and this would likely be brought to the Barnard voters this summer or fall. My aim is to do all that is possible to address Barnard voters' concerns regarding merger and to set the scene for a positive vote that would then go to the MUD electorate, ideally preceding next year's budget formation. As always, if anyone has any questions, reach out to me and or other members like Bryce on the Barnard board. And what she told me was that she was hoping that the policy stuff would have been worked out by now, but it hasn't. So after I told her where we were at, she was hoping that we would wrap it up by May, and maybe if we add an extra meeting or two, we can. And then, in that case, we could probably schedule a public meeting in Barnard that has to happen before a vote, and that vote could be in September. I think, that is best case scenario. We talked about it being important to before the next budget. I mean, it has to be.
When would the vote take place?
September.
Okay.
So that before we start the process of building our budgets,
For March.
we could have them included in the process. Okay, we're going to move on from this conversation. If you have questions or concerns or thoughts that you think about afterwards, please just process them through us. We're going to move on to after-school programming. Keep in mind that we are not asked to vote on anything that's being presented tonight. It is really just an overview of where Mary Beth and the admin team are to date with after-school programming. At our May 13th meeting, the admin team will be presenting a proposal for the after-school program, and our vote will be on actually the tuition rate that we would like to see set for the after-school program. So then I'm going to leave it up to you, Mary Beth.
Great, thank you. So you have this in your book, or this is actually forwarded under separate cover as well. And one of the things, just to kind of frame this, is that I think we're all painfully aware of the amount of change that is happening in all of our districts and how hard it is to keep saying, oh, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about this? But having said that, reliable after-school programming is a concern for many parents, and Adam, you raised that before the start of the meeting. So we felt like even though that this is kind of turning over another rock, it really needs to be done in order to answer questions for parents about what after-school programming could look like in our district. So where we started was just trying to capture information around what does it currently look like. And what we find here is the same thing that we find in many places, that each school that was running as its own district had different policies and ways of structuring things. There were some commonalities across the programming. One is that it's a struggle financially to run viable after-school programs. because of the number of kids that it takes to have kids in the program, the consistency of that. So across the district, all schools have had some challenges helping to have these programs run. One of the things to be aware of is that in the after-school program, it runs under 2 separate licenses. So, and by 2 separate licenses, it also means 2 sets of regulations. So there's a set of regulations for K through 6, and then there are pre-K regulations. So when we run these programs, we have to be mindful that we meet both sets of licensing regulations. When Prosper Valley was operational, it did not have an after-school program. Other than that, all of our schools have had after-school programs, including Barnard Academy. There are some grants that have been supplementing after-school programming this year in a couple of schools. They will not be available for next school year. And there have been, I think it speaks to the level of importance for this for families. But I know in Reading, the community has actually raised a significant amount of money to try to keep these programs viable. One of the challenges that we have is that people kind of pay as they go, so so there's no prepayment. So that runs into a number of operational challenges. And staffing for these programs is challenging, and it's often really hard to fill positions that are there. So those are kind of commonalities you see across the district. You get a sense of student days and program hours at Killington 3 to 5, Reading 2:15 to 5, and Woodstock 3 to 5:30.
Is that accurate? Why is it 2:15?
Yeah, so one of the things that we have occurring in Reading is a busing situation, that in order to get the bus run out to the middle school, high school, they start about 45 minutes earlier than other schools.
Oh, okay.
I know, Richard, you looked into that with the bus company.
Unless you change the number of buses, that's what we'll have to do.
Gotcha, okay.
So what happens in Reading is that they're finishing up earlier, so they have a longer amount of time that they have to cover in terms of after-school programming.
And what would the cost of a bus be to change it so everybody is more in a similar daily hours? Or equal, yeah.
I'm thinking the cost of an additional bus is about $36,000 per year. It would be an additional bus, so that a bus picks up high school kids, brings them up, or anyone coming up to Woodstock. An additional bus has to be there to pick up Reading kids and bring them to.
Hold on one sec. How many Reading kids are on the elementary school bus?
I don't know the answer to that. I can.
Getting them there at 7:15.
But I guess my question is, does it have to be one of those big buses for 50 kids versus one of the littler buses for
one of the things,
25?
My understanding, and Richard, check me on this if I've got it right, but the expense actually is in the salary of the driver.
The expense is the driver more than it is actually the bus. But it could be a smaller one potentially. That's absolutely true.
Can we just look at that cost and then how it would affect the equity of school hours and then after school program? Because that's going to be a budget item coming down the road anyway. We may not be able to correct it for this upcoming year, but maybe it could, if the board felt strong enough about it, could.
Yeah, I could certainly price out what it would be if we wanted to add an additional bus and have Butler come back to us on that.
I mean, what a nightmare for Reading parents.
Well, anyway, this is a longer, more complex conversation, but.
Is this accurate that it goes till 5:50? Like, when it says the staffing is till 5:50?
Oh, I'm sorry, it's 5, I think it's 5:30, that is.
Reading's, the staff, kids, the latest they can pick up is 5.
5.
That's a pretty steadfast time frame.
Okay.
So that, yes.
So that is 5.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the 2:15? It makes me wonder, are those children missing 30 minutes a day of education time?
No, because they're starting earlier. Started earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
7:15 to 2:15.
Oh, my God. Okay.
It's very early.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know that.
Never be able to get my kids. Never be able to get my kids there.
Okay. So you start to see where some of these challenges lie within the district. So that's a piece in terms of the actual hours for the program. Another place that we see a lot of discrepancy is in the actual tuition rates charged. So you'll see tuition rates that range from $12 per hour up to $18 per hour. The structure of how we structure the after-school program, who the director is. So in Killington, there's a teacher as a director, and she is compensated at $300 per week. At Reading, John Hansen is the director. He's not taking any payment. And then there's a site manager who receives $25 an hour at $15 hours per week. And at Woodstock, there's a director who receives $25, not to exceed $29 per week. So one of the very
29 hours?
I'm sorry, not to exceed 29 hours per week. And one of the things that we've already begun discussing at our leadership team is how can we look at a director structure where all programs could benefit and we're not duplicating. And so that's a place that we see a real benefit within the merger, that there may be some ways that we can work with that. Comparatively as well, when we look at the actual staffing of the program, we see large fluctuations in terms of what's being paid, from $15 an hour to $20 an hour, and then in a school where $25 an hour if the person is a teacher. And then with all that as well, we see average daily participation rates that range from about 10 students per day up to 21 students per day. So the intent of today's conversation is to make you aware of the puzzle pieces that we're dealing with and the discrepancies that we see. We have started this conversation at our school leadership team meeting. Mary Guggenberger from Killington has volunteered to take a deep dive to see if she can figure out some potential solutions. She's going to bring that back to our elementary administrators at our next meeting, so that when we get together on May 13th, which will be the next formal board meeting, the elementary principals will be here to answer questions, and they will come to you with a recommendation of how we can best move forward with this. And I think that the mindset is, how do we make this work for all schools? That we know this is both a critical component for parents, and we know that when kids have quality after-school programming experiences, they come to school the next day better prepared to learn. So we're coming at it from that mindset and trying to work through the complexities that you see here.
Can you clarify, so May 13th, they'll be putting forward a tuition rate, or they're going to be putting forward whether schools have programming?
The intent, we are going to work really hard to see that we get schools that have programming. We've got to run all these numbers, look at what the tuition rate is. The hope is that we can come to you saying that schools are going to run after school programming, and here's what the tuition rate is. That is what we are hoping to have as an outcome.
You can probably anticipate what I'm going to say. I think for people in Reading in particular, and there'll be probably a small revolt if there's no after-school programming, given, as you talked about in the beginning of this, a lot of changes have happened, right? So to take away after-school programming completely changes how people get their kids to school, what they do, so I would behoove you to really, and us as a board, of how do we support this process with equity across the district.
Well, and I think that in our conversations with Mary Beth that Jennifer and I have on a weekly basis to prepare the agendas and also the items that we think are really important to put onto our calendar for the next year, that conversation with Jennifer and myself and Mary Beth and Richard in looking at the monies and how we're investing in our schools across the district, we felt very strongly as the two chairs of the board that after-school programming is essential to a child's success in school, especially when we're looking at maybe both people in the homes working and not being available until 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and so on and so forth, and having safe environments for them to be in, having the possibilities of tutoring as well, just having some kind of functional after-school program that they can rely on that is safe, and also educationally balanced. So that's how our conversation led to this conversation tonight.
But understand our pushback to Mary Beth was, what's going on? And you can see, it's all over the place how we're doing this.
This seems
And
like the
we're-
next logical step of as we've unified as the district.
Absolutely.
Coming across all these pieces of what happens here doesn't happen here.
Yeah,
Correct.
we need to have uniform programs, and I'm quite sure we can find some efficiencies in that.
Yeah.
So anyway, we're at this point they're all getting snacks on their own. Food service isn't doing it. There's all these kinds of things that we need to look at to figure out how we can make this work. And just so that we are informed about what price we're paying as a district to offer this service, because this is not a break-even service. So we've got to figure out, not in all the schools, some it is. So we need to figure out, just so that we're informed about what are we spending on this and setting the tuition. And what we'll be asked to vote on is setting the tuition rate. Okay.
Pamela?
I just wanted to, I think it's a great idea to look at it and what we're talking about, but I wanted to just put in a good word for the enrichment opportunities that happen in some of the after-school programs. So they bring in outside, I don't know if they do this everywhere, but bring in outside people. So, my son took robotics on his Wednesday after school or drumming or whatever. And it was really important. It was really educational. It was a great thing. So I was really happy with that. And I'd love to make sure that's a part of it.
Okay.
Everywhere.
Right.
I don't remember what schools it was in, but there was a district that was talking about this just recently in the state somewhere, and they were using this as an opportunity to add more allied arts, because sometimes it's been challenging to have those during the school day, especially under some of these new budgets and mergers. So some people are finding that way, so it could be an area of opportunity as well.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on, because we're hitting our 7:30 deadline and we're past it. Okay, NUVU presentation. We're trying. All right, I will. Take you out of there. All right, so this presentation, one of the things that we are finding is that we are looking to continue to refine programs and planning, and having the board endorse a long-term commitment to NUVU feels important at this point, and it's impacting our ability to move forward with different decisions and different things that we think will benefit kids. Many of you had the opportunity to visit the NUVU studio prior to a board meeting. I think that might have been in March. But you got to see what was happening, but we really didn't have the opportunity to sit and talk about what's really going on with this program, why is it beneficial for our district. So I wanted to take a little bit of time this evening to do that with you. To frame it really quickly, but I think with a fair amount of clarity, oftentimes when we think about school, an analogy is made to student A and student B, right? Student A, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, focused on math, science, English, and social studies. Student B is a student that is getting experiences in those content areas. There is content mastery, but there is also the development of communication skills, collaboration skills, and other 21st century skills that are typically seen as critical problem solving, creativity, and that type of thing.
So you want one of the things that I think is important to think about is what kind of education do you want our students to get here in this district? Which student is going to be best prepared for a higher education or career? If you had to hire one of these students, which student would you want to hire? So along with student A and student B, there's classrooms. And I would identify this as a student A classroom. It actually was one that was envisioned by the Jetsons, right? But not much has changed, right? Kids in rows, information on the chalkboard, the only change is teacher's a robot, right? But this idea that I sit and you impart information to me and I take it in. In a student B classroom, what we're seeing is teacher's not in front of the room. Teacher's over here. Teacher is coach, teacher is facilitator. Kids are directing their own learning. They're not all working at the same pace on the same project. They are self-directing their learning. This is another example. Communication. Who's at the front of the room? Student presenting to other students about what he's learning. Right. This is an example of a student B learning environment. This is just some data around some of the reports that come out about what businesses are looking for and colleges are looking for. So the National Association of Colleges and Employers Job Outlook for 2018. When employers were asked which attributes beyond a strong GPA were most valuable, respondents put problem solving and the ability to work in teams jointly at the top of the list for the second consecutive year. Pew Research Center, the future of jobs and job training. Among 1,400 technologists, scholars, strategic thinkers, and education leaders surveyed, said soft and human skills were cited by most respondents as crucial for survival in the age of artificial intelligence and robotics. Pay Scale 2016, of the 64,000 workplace managers surveyed, 60% said new college graduate hires lacked critical thinking skills and problem-solving skills. So this is, again, student A. If you look here, where are the jobs? Who's got a job in this kind of environment? And if you have a job, what kind of skills do you have? Problem solving, critical thinking, ability to work with other people. So what you see there is this idea that there's a shift from routine to non-routine tasks. In that student A world, visible, easily measurable, that's what the tasks are. They're linear, they're sequential, they're repetitive, they're repeatable, and they're logic-based. If this, then that, right? In the world that the 21st century, in this world of work, with all the landscape shifts that are occurring, what we see that the people that have jobs are able to deal with this high task variety. The tasks are, what you need to do is often invisible and difficult to measure. They're non-linear, they're non-repetitive. The answers may be different every time. And instead of a if this, then that, there's a level of intuition and knowledge and experience that goes into decision making. The service economy, this idea that you will be interacting with other human beings and knowing how to work with other human beings and understanding their needs. 80% of jobs have a service component, okay? Most occupations will require interfacing with others. So if you look at this job chart, the blue is the service industry. The black is industry. And the purple is agriculture. So what you see happening is in the service industry, where you are responding to a client, that's where the jobs are. So, what does all this have to do with New View Studio? Well, what is an architectural design studio? An architectural design studio has hands-on problem solving to solve complex, comprehensive problems. It's taught within a multidisciplinary framework, so that means that you're bringing in math and science and English language arts and we'll look at an example of music, right? That the projects are developed through an iterative process, right? That it's not repeatable, you've got new situations, figure out the solutions. And students confront the small and large context within problems, right? So a problem has multiple layers to it. And students are asked and challenged to think about, how would the solution to this problem be perceived by this group? What about that group? What about this situation? And they're exposed to messy situations. Figure it out. What's that going to look like? Try, fail, fix. And so New View is an environment that is exposing kids to these non-routine tasks and building skills in those areas. What is an architectural design studio? Students learn that solutions depend on perspective, and only by understanding an issue from multiple perspectives can they fully explore the terrain of possibilities. This prepares students for a service economy. I'm trying to step in your shoes so that I understand what it is that you need. What is an architectural design studio? Intense, feedback-rich environment that provides students with information and support for continuous self-evaluation, reflection, and improvement. Right? That ability to lead your own learning. Right? There's not these routinized tasks that you tell me what to do and I'll just keep doing it. You're constantly going to be presented with new, unique situations that you have to unpack and figure out. And the architectural design studio helps to build this skill in terms of self-directed learners. Finances of the New View Studio. So this gives you some numbers that some of the programs that we currently have in the school. So agriculture runs about $130,000 a year, art runs about $250,000 a year, athletics runs about $430,000 a year, library about $140,000, music around $100,000, and New View runs about $215,000 when you include in consumable materials. When we look at the strategic plan critical focus areas, and we're going to be unpacking the strategic plan, the draft of that here in this group, but this is a piece that's already gone out to the board. We have 5 critical focus areas. New View experiences like that are connected to student success. They're part of our learning environments. It checks that box. It checks the culture piece around self-direction and student voice and critique and feedback, and this idea of community alliance, because almost all of these programs run in alliance with another organization within the community. And probably most importantly, that strongly aligns with our portrait of a graduate and what it is that we are establishing for outcomes for kids. Self-direction, critical problem solving, stewardship, skillful communication, and academic excellence. Okay, before I do that, I'm going to actually stop at this moment, because one of the things that I think it's really important for the board to see is what are the kids actually working on in the New View Studio? So what you have in front of you is a list of kind of the big open-ended questions that students are asked to engage with in this environment. And my suggestion, I would ask everybody to just take one example, take this home with you and look at all the examples, but just take one and read through it. And think about how those kinds of prompts and how those kinds of challenges tie into the development of these types of skills.
So who would have written each of these? Like,
So that would be the fellow, and depending on the content area, it could have also been done with a fellow and a teacher in the content area.
Okay.
In the interest of time, we'll stop there. I do really encourage you to read through these. They give you a good understanding of the kinds of things that are happening there. Just quickly to highlight, particularly if there are people at home that are listening, one example is rooted installations. So these are projects that kids are doing that really tie into this inspired locally, right? They are looking at collaborating with artists and craftsmen and farmers and artists and food producers. I know they went up to Kelly Way and talked with folks there. And they are asked to create, together to create a piece that will tie into the design and growth and production of a specific food, and then tie it into some of these local resources. Students develop prototypes, so they try, fail, fix in terms of coming up with different solutions to this. And so you see these ideas of critical problem solving, and they need to communicate their information back out. They're going to have installations exhibited across town so that their work is public, and they're needing to communicate to folks what it is that they've been doing. On the next page, there's an example of one that's prepared globally, where our kids are partnering with students in Turkey to start looking at playground equipment, right? And designers and innovators are creating structures that go far beyond swings, encouraging users of different age groups and abilities to customize their play experience. In the studio, students will look beyond typical playground structures to design structures that can engage the full spectrum of possible users and integrate the thrill of adventure into every day. They're doing this in collaboration with Karam House in Turkey, and they prototype these play objects. And then they're working together, meeting through virtual meetings in the lab, talking with kids in different countries about what are you finding, what are you doing, and then they're actually building out their projects. There's examples in here where kids are working on social justice issues connected with and looking at building a map that helps to connect with some of the social justice questions that are happening in the Spanish language. There's examples of music prompts where kids are working. So what you see here and why that learning environment looks different is that it's not a body of information that gets imparted to kids. We are going to set you up and ask you to grapple with a complex, authentic problem where you're going to be working with people within your community to solve this problem, and it directly aligns with the outcomes it is that we're trying to get for kids in our portrait. Questions there? Anything that people saw that they needed clarified?
I'm
Yes.
just curious about how many kids actually get to participate in it each year. Is it an elective? Can they do it each year, or how does that work?
Yeah, and Gary, since we have you here, I'm going to let you speak to that.
So we wrote it in 3 different formats. There's one format which is a few description there, the idea class. So that's offered as an elective opportunity. There's both a middle school idea that 7th and 8th graders can take, and then there's a high school idea class. So that's a standalone course in the middle school. It's a quarter course. In the high school, students typically take it for the whole year. Sometimes they'll take it for a semester. Another version is really integrated into the different course versions. So the astronomy example is one in that packet where the new View Lab is really incorporated into the astronomy course. So students are both doing some of the classroom-based work you might see in the usual classroom, but also doing projects in the new View Lab. That's also the Spanish example in there too. It's another example like that. So we've got those sorts of partnerships. Last year, the 7th grade team did 2 different rounds where all the 7th graders on the team went through the new View Lab, again, incorporating their classes. So that's kind of version 2. And then version 3 is we have a lot of students doing independent study work. So these are students who typically did the idea class already, have a level of competency and understanding of the new View Lab and the processes, and now are doing their individualized process. So when you total all those things up into numbers, last year when I totaled it, with those we had about 250 kind of student overall. Now is that unique students? No, but it'd be unique student experiences, so some are doubling up in some ways. This year the number is a little lower because we don't have as many full class integrations going on, but that's just kind of a year 2 flow, but one we're going to reintegrate next year. Claire, do you have a question? Yeah.
Did you bring your kids in too, Rob? Did I hear a rumor?
Yes, we
so
did.
Outside of that.
Yeah, so elementary, so they're having some 6th graders
we
too.
were welcomed by that. I mean, he's looking for more collaboration.
So I assume there's more opportunity for
More
that
opportunities
type
there
of
too. Yeah.
cross-pollination to
Yeah.
elementary students.
So for next year's curriculum, how many electives do the kids have now for that opportunity to sign up for this upcoming year?
How many sections there would be of it, or? not
Yeah,
a
like
lot?
how many courses are offered in the elective end of things for kids to take through that
In that
STEM
specific
program?
spot?
Yeah.
So there'll be at least 1 middle school opportunity per quarter.
Okay.
So I got that.
Yeah.
There will probably be 3 high school idea sections, and then there will be the variety of courses added onto it. So as far as standalone ideas, again, this is preliminary, I would say running at 3-year-long experiences for high school, and then at least 4 quarter options in the middle school. This year we're actually running 5 quarters in the middle school. We added a second quarter this 4th quarter because of interest and demand.
Okay.
Semester.
Oh, that's right, excuse me, the middle school we're expanding to a semester program next year because we found that the quarter experience wasn't long enough, so it's better to have a longer experience.
Okay. Elaine?
Max is the fellow in the new Rula. What's his contract? How long is he with us?
Yeah. So currently, we've been doing a year-over-year contract. What we would like to enter into is a longer contract, and I think that Max enjoys the area a great deal, but is looking for some sense of job security around the role, so that he is interested in a longer contract. So currently, it's a 1 year. We would like to see it move to a 3-year.
Is this the second year we've had a new Blue Fellow?
Yes, so we had Dustin last year, and then Max came in over the summer. Yep, and started like around August.
Okay, so just to piggyback onto Melena, so Max is, can you just explain to people what the terms of the contract are with New Boo? So that Max is our fellow that works here
well,
now.
Actually, the next couple slides I think will
says
help
that.
with that.
Okay.
Okay, so I can just kind of give you a
that's fine.
sense of, kind of what is it that we get as a benefit for being part of New Boo. Okay. Now, Jim,
do you have something
that
that isn't
connect,
going
or
to
do
be?
you have a?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of confused why we're sitting here talking about Nuvu. I'm one of 4 people here that when this first started out, that this was for a STEAM lab, and there was was a gentleman in town that did a lot of work to get a STEAM lab here. This is for the people that are new here, okay? And we all agree that we need a STEAM lab here. I think that it's all. So all of these things that I just saw means there's a STEAM lab here. I think the biggest question that I've had over the last year and a half is not the STEAM lab, it's the new VU coming in of the fellow. So I'm going to take it a little bit further here. I'm still confused because we voted in a budget that just passed this March that included new VU here for this upcoming year, which starts September. It's not the year that we're in now, so it's there. But what I hear early in the meeting from public, from Melissa Fellows, was that, you know, Max is really good. And what I hear is, from here now, is saying that Max is really good and Max would like to have some kind of security. Well, Max will have no security if we continue with new VU, because new VU is Max's boss. I think I just said what I just want to say, so just remember that. We wanted a STEAM lab here, we got a STEAM lab here. The goal, which we all had in our last meeting, was we as a board set a goal, and we set to the administration what our goals are and try to keep them into those goals. The goal was to have a STEAM lab put into this school. For the benefit of everything that we just saw is what we want. We were supposed to get some type of teacher that was going to manage it. Didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, but I'm not complaining. We've gone to new VU. We've gone to, with this contract of some $200,000 a year to hire out this person from there. And I think right now what you're seeing is that we've maybe located a person, I'm not sure if he's the guy, but I'm hearing most likely he is, that we've found this person. He would like security to come here to Woodstock and take over this STEAM lab. I'm just saying what I
think you're leaping to some conclusions. I
think
think they need to hear the rest of Mary Beth's.
Yeah.
I don't think that's accurate.
Well, I mean, I heard that we want to, jump to conclusions. I was just told, or I just listened to a presentation that I was told that Max is looking for some.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
We'd like to give it to him.
Okay, let me give some clarification for everybody. In our next meeting, we will vote on whether or not we want to sign a 3-year contract with NUVU. In our next meeting, we will be voting on whether or not we want to sign a 3-year contract with NUVU. This presentation is to show from an education standpoint the importance of the NUVU partnership that Mary Beth and other teachers feel very strongly about. In that signing of a 3-year contract, we are guaranteed the employment with Max in particular. It is not to secure him because he wants that security.
I'm using words that were given.
I'm just letting you know. I want to give clarification to that. It is to secure him in particular to be that fellow within the program because we have had such great success with him over the last year. And this will be a budgetary item in our budget as we move forward. Anybody need any other clarification? When this program started, it started with a partnership with NUVU because we did not have the availability of a trained STEM teacher. And it was recommended because we had the funding to partner with NUVU. That is now complete, and it's now our responsibility to include that partnership moving forward in our budget. That's what Mary Beth is presenting tonight because she feels very strongly from an educational point of view that this supports our portrait of a graduate and moving our students forward into a more global 21st century thought process.
Yeah, and there'd be a couple things that I would want to clarify from that. One, I would say, though, that I would strongly say from an educational perspective, I think this is an outstanding program, but this is not my personal program, and that this is the feeling of the school leadership team, that this is an outstanding resource to have in this district. Secondly, and I would be the first to say, I think we have an absolutely remarkable New View Fellow, Max, and that is certainly something that I would love to see Max continue, because we certainly benefit from his skill set. But that what I am sharing with you is I believe that the value is actually in the New View partnership. And I want to explain to you where that thinking is coming from. So the first is that the New View Fellow, as you alluded to, Paige, finding somebody with deep expertise in architectural design is not an easy thing to find. And so New View is doing that searching. They have the networking. They're connected to universities with people that know how to do this kind of work. The New View Fellow provides professional development for our teachers at no cost. And the support, he gets support from New View to help do that. New View provides professional development for the fellow. So the fellow is going in the summer learning about new approaches, new designs, new projects, so that we're not spending money on his professional development or her professional development. Right? We're not spending money on the professional development that our teachers are getting after school. The New View Fellow teaches a 2-week summer program for our kids during the summer as part of this contract.
Can I ask one question?
Yep.
The 2-week summer program, is that separate from SOAP, or is that
it's
part
integrated
of
into SOAP.
Okay.
Yeah. The New View staff instructs summer, so we will be, and you have this flyer in front of you, the 2019 Innovation Camp for Educators. We are hosting this here in our studio across the state. It is listed on Castleton website. Teachers can come and take that. And we have worked it out with New View that the tuition that we get 70% of their profits. So we get that. In this latest iteration of contract, New View has been willing to allow us to send 2 of our students from Woodstock Union High School to their New View campus in Cambridge, Mass. For a semester at no additional cost. The New View staff, and you heard about that kind of idea of critique and feedback and change. The New View staff, not just the fellow, but people are coming up from Cambridge and giving feedback to our kids around how is your project, here's how you can make your project better, have you thought about this, I'm wondering if this is happening just the way that you want it to. You see, if you go through this packet, what you will see is that these projects are designed for us, and they are complex, challenging projects. They give us consultation on the design for all these projects. So Max is working with a team at New View to help design these projects. They give us technical consultation. So when we want to know what's the best 3D printer to buy, here's what you need to know. Here's the printers that you need to get. All of this collaboration, so for example, in the Turkey example, that the kids are collaborating on a common software platform that comes from New View, right? And we have visions and hopes that we are going to be partnering with other students in other New View studios. And that is something that we have access to in different parts of this country, such as Louisiana. There are programs in Turkey. Scotland is a place that seems to have a lot of potential for us to have exchanges with our kids. There's schools in India, there's schools there's a number of schools in this country as well. The reason that we can do that is because of this partnership.
And we're the only public school.
And we are the only
in the
public
world
school right now that has that, and it enables our kids to be collaborating in a way that is incredibly unique. The access of the Newview network of schools for collaboration and potential student exchanges in the future. We are having some very serious conversations about building an exchange program, much like our exchange program in Spain and France with Scotland, so that our kids had that opportunity to either go study in Scotland or kids from Scotland had the opportunity to study here. The way that we get that done is through the network. And then one of the things that we've talked about is this idea of how do we attract people to our district, what makes us unique and special. And we have full-day pre-K programming. We've been talking about, the importance of after-school programming. But one of the things that sets us apart is that, almost all schools at this point have a STEAM lab. But I can tell you that when you go there, they have maker spaces. The question is, what do we do with all this stuff? How does this work? What people don't have is a fellow that has deep, intensive knowledge in architectural design. There is no other program in the state that is doing things at the level that we are doing them. And so for me, and again, I cannot say enough good things about Max, but this really isn't about Max. This is about building and committing to a partnership that brings a tremendous amount of value to this district. So I wanted to be sure that I clarified that for everybody, because it's really important that folks understand that.
I'd also like to just add to that conversation the benefits of a NUVU partnership, which we probably would not have if we just had a STEM teacher in place, is that if we made a projection with this professional development course and 20 people signed up, 70% that would come back to us would be $25,000 plus. That's really great money to offset not only this program, but other programs like an after-school program, a pre-K program. It brings in revenues that we don't see currently. So it only strengthens the potential of this partnership and programming, also with extending beyond just our community into a professional development community as well, because it gives the opportunity of people receiving 3 credits on top of just participating and learning professional development.
And if I could also, just another connection to that, but one of the things, and I don't know if Garrett, if you want to speak to this, is the visa program that we're currently involved in to invite students internationally to come and spend time and spend a year at our school. And there's 2 different types of visas that can happen under. One is kind of a cultural exchange, and then another one is a tuition-based exchange, where students are paying tuition to come to our schools. And again, as something that says what makes us unique, when you're sitting in a different country and saying, what school am I most interested in? There are a whole host of reasons why our school system is special and unique and wonderful. This adds to the list. And depending on what particular needs or interest students might have, it may be a particularly compelling reason to decide on the Woodstock Union Middle School, High School.
Can I also state one more advantage that I see in this partnership with NUVU? For those who went to Lee's talk on Thursday about the facilities issue, we are going to need to attract some significant funding in order to remediate the issues that exist with our facilities. And that cannot be done with taxes alone. We need private funders. And it's programs like this NUVU partnership that are very enticing to private funders who would want to continue to fund additional initiatives that we hope to do in the future in terms of addressing the shortcomings that currently exist in this building.
Pia?
I just want to say, I really think you did such a wonderful job presenting this tonight, because I have been, I've appreciated the NUVU Lab, and my son's been in a couple things, and so I'm familiar with it, and but I have been concerned about the cost, And I do think we should explore some private funding or grants also, but that's a side issue. I just really appreciate that you, by going through so many details about the benefits, and especially how, what excited me the most just now was talking about the comparison between a kind of old-fashioned curriculum and how this helps update it, and the more that it comes into and sort of pushes or creeps into the traditional curriculum and the content-based classes, I think the better. And I know that it increases the engagement level of the students. I have heard the kids talking about it and seen what they've done, and so I just wanted to, put in a positive word about it.
Thank you. And I know one of the things I've heard too is some folks will say, oh, well, they just come in and they just drop in. Is it even really a class? But I think one of the really interesting things to know about this particular studio is that it is a class that kids go to, but what you find oftentimes is that kids choose to go there in their free time. And that speaks to engagement, right? That I'm working on a project that I'm so fired up about. If I've got free time, I'm going there. And when we have learning experiences where kids say, I get to do it instead of I have to do it, that's a good thing. And so I think that there are lots of kind of confusions about exactly what it is and how it all works. And I keep thinking about the piece around the Jetsons. All of us grew up in this kind of school, right? We all spent 17 years doing this. And so when you start thinking about what new environments look like, oftentimes it's really hard to unpack them and actually figure out what it is that you're seeing and why it's structured in the way that it is. But I appreciate those comments, Pam. Bob and then Adam.
It was at Skidmore College on Friday night. The president of the college was there speaking to a lot of admitted students, and I could have sworn he stole your speech. The beginning of your presentation, because it was all about exactly what you're talking about, which is to say colleges are in that place, cross-disciplinary courses and a real commitment to this kind of learning. So I think it's imperative. I think this is a no-brainer. I think the cost is more than justified, and we should be supporting this. And if there's a way to get to a commitment contract, the question I had was, would NUVU allow a fellow to stay in place for 3 years? Is that something that we know?
We have been in conversation with them, and we are all feeling like this would work. Yes.
Great.
Adam first.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Adam. Yeah.
Was it last month or 2 months ago that we did the tour?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think I asked them, but I'll ask, is there plans, more integration? So I asked about how does the geometry teacher integrate what they're going over versus with us it was an overhead projector and a two-dimensional understanding of what geometry, what I mean? How do we further integrate with other subjects, because that's really the, where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of breaking down of silos within the content area is really critical. And what I would offer is that, and Garrett, I'll let you jump in there, is that this opened last spring. And in 1 year, it's already been built there. And I think the potential here is so much bigger than what we already have.
Yeah, I'm just going to further on that professional development piece, and we had after school trainings that I think we had 15 or 20 teachers participating in that and going on. So more and more of our capacity building with teachers being involved in the lab are really expanding that piece. So we have what can the fellow do, and there's a limitation on how much you can touch, but then the fellow really expansion to the remainder of the staff is really powerful. So again, going back to this professional development model that's integral to this partnership is really powerful.
And also in our history, because will we be going into our third year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it opened last spring.
So it's going into its third year come September. The first year it was more collaboration with teachers throughout the school, correct? Mm-hmm. And then this last year it has been integrated more into the curriculum for school choice as programming. And then I know that Mary Beth and the admin team are working to have it even more integrated, as you heard, with 3 electives in high school and one elective choice in middle school, or
one opportunity
yeah,
at different labs. Yep.
So hopefully, I mean, the goal is to keep integrating it more and more as each year passes.
Yeah, and that's like, that again speaks to this New View network. Yeah, you're networked into this group of educators that is constantly looking at how to get better, how to iterate. And when they figure out something in one of their schools here, that gets transferred over to our school as well. So we learn together as a network. That's very, very different than what's happening in most high schools that are opening a STEM lab. They're just not tied into this kind of a network. Right?
Oh, wait, Lou was
Oh, sorry, Lou.
I don't mind. I would say this, I absolutely love this program. I think it is great for students, and I'm really interested in how do we get more students into it and through it. I know you're working on that. I also think, having come from a school district where we rebuilt 2 schools, we had some programs like this that were in place ahead of time. And I've got to tell you, they just took off and flourished, absolutely, when form and function went together. And so the path that we're on and what I think we want to accomplish over some time, this is the kind of thing that I think gets us in that direction and makes our time meaningful right now, but also sets us up for the future. And so I agree with Claire, it differentiates us in important ways. We should be investing in this as much as we can and figure out how we can get more out of it instead of less.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I actually think the dollar amount is not that high. I mean, when you look at this, the salary of someone plus the fringe medical, everything that comes along with it, and then the materials you said were included, right?
Right,
There's
consumables that go through.
Right. So there's that aspect, the professional development that we're not paying for to have him do, but also that he's providing to us. And I know that was something that you reduced in our budget a little bit. So I think if you were to kind of evaluate all of those things, I'm sure we'd come out close to the same amount, I think, even if it wasn't through them, I would think.
Especially when you're comparing $430,000 in athletics versus $250,000 in something like this that is such huge academic, educational, far-reaching tendrils. To me, I agree with Bob. I like your word that it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I don't know why we wouldn't embrace something like this.
So then, do we have any other comments?
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
Do we understand who's coming through the lab right now? Are these our very best students using it, or is it really across kind of all of our students? Some are going to college, some are going to trades. Who's coming into a lab like this?
I think it's a really true cross-section of our student population. Just kind of, without getting into the specific ones, but we've got a whole range. We definitely have students who have not found success in other environments or finding immense success and real turnaround experience as far as life experience and what they might go on to. But I would say we're really serving a real cross-section. And some things are by design, like when we have the entire 7th grade go through it. Of course, it's every single 7th grader. But also in those elective courses, we're seeing all sorts of students go through it.
I would say one of the problems we have in education is having 21st century skills taught to students across that wide variety of where they're going to go and what they're interested in. This strikes me as a program that does that really well. I agree. So,
has everyone spoken once?
He's trying to follow Robert's rule. He's kept his mouth shut. All right, go. You have 3 minutes. Somebody chime in.
No, listen. I'm going to say I'm one of 4 that first voted in for this team. The confusion that has been going on for the last 2 years is actually moving over to Newville. The presentation was really great. The explanation of the fellow was better explained after I asked the question, okay? If this comes to a vote, I would vote yes, but then I have to have a question here. We're responsible to the taxpayers, and I will vote yes, but you're asking us at the next meeting or some meeting to vote yes to a 3-year contract. And I don't know if one individual board has that right to vote. And I want to make sure it's done correctly. So the question goes to Richard, because on a select board, you cannot enter into a contract without going to a townwide vote. And I would be a person that would push for this in my town, now that everything is cleared up about the different questions that I had. That's my question.
Yeah, and it's a very good question, Jim. We do, for example, have a multi-year contract with our busing provider. So there is a mechanism to do a multi-year program there may be language within the contract that speaks to a budget or speaks to the future approvals. I put a phone call into our council to get specifically what we are allowed to do or what language needs to be in the contract. And I'll have that, I'm sure, within the next couple of days.
So I have 2 more minutes here, so just to make it clear, I am for it.
Yep.
I just want to make sure that we as a board do this correctly, okay? That's it. And I'm glad to hear that you're talking to council or whatever to get the wording correctly. So yeah, someone else could have my minute and a half.
So then my question for you, Richard, is do we have the ability to have a vote to approve the partnership with NUVU and that 3-year contract?
I would believe that we do,
Okay.
which is in effect what you're saying is to the administration to negotiate the contract, ensure it's in compliance with all of the laws,
Okay.
and that we can go forward with that to ensure that it's in compliance.
So, that being said, we were trying to stick to our plan, Mary Beth, of introducing subject matters and topics and then giving us 2 weeks to be able to ask questions or get clarification. But it sounds like this board is behind this topic 100%. Would you like to vote tonight so that we could move forward in the process?
I would once again go say it's not on the agenda and let's do this right. You need to alert the public that we are having a vote on a specific item.
Likely a contract's going to have an escalator in it, right, over 3 years.
Yeah.
So probably it's best to actually
Get it right.
see the contract. Is that timing affecting it in terms of conversation?
I think that part of where you see me hesitating is that we are trying to get this contract nailed down for a lot of different reasons, and I have felt like I could not engage in a 3-year contract without talking to the board about it.
I think you have the approval now.
And so I just, in order for me to get things nailed down and for people to feel like, okay, there's some level of commitment, the time, I've already pushed it out a little bit, like, give me another month, give me, what I do think I hear is that there's a strong level of support on the board for this, and I may be able to work with that in order to kind of give those assurances to the folks that need those assurances.
Why don't we do this? Take a vote tonight to move forward with the contract, but we will have it in our next meeting to technically approve. Does that make the contract?
Well, I'll make a motion for to give Mary Beth the approval to move forward with NUVU to discuss a 3-year contract.
A second.
Okay? That's what you need to do.
Yeah, and
the
then
information comes back.
you don't have to stop the process.
Right, and that will be helpful to everybody, so I do appreciate that.
With the outcome of Richard making sure that
And then technically it can be on the agenda so that
You
if
get that,
the
Reena?
public wants to comment, we have that.
I think Claire seconded.
So we're still voting in 2 weeks, though, or?
We'll come back. Yeah, this is just
We're
a
gonna come
vote to
back
let
to
Mary
this.
Beth have the permission to move forward, to bring us the contract and all that other stuff. That's what this
It's a
is.
technicality more than
Yeah.
anything else.
I'm not
but
saying that I'm opposing it. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
It gives,
No, but
it gives Mary Beth some
tired.
assurance, and now you're able to.
It will mean a lot, I think, to everybody to be able to say that the board has charged me to move forward and get this contract set up.
Call the question.
I move the motion on the table. Everybody in favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, Mary Beth, it's your baby to pursue.
Well, it's lots of good people working on this.
All right. This is just very brief. We had talked about this in our previous meeting. Jennifer and I have signed the Superintendent Evaluation Service Agreement that we will be working with the VSBA to put into process a standard superintendent evaluation process so that future board members and chairs will have a process in place that hasn't been there for many, many years. And we feel that as chairs that it's essential to one, supporting our superintendent, but also putting an evaluation process so that there's accountability both on the board side and the superintendent's side for our future.
We have had no unified process.
Yeah.
It has just been up to
Been
some
bad.
board member who takes it on themselves. I did it last year, or like, that's not the way to do it. So
Right.
it will be done by we will pay a $1,000 fee to the VSBA to do it.
Yes.
They'll send, Paige and I are gonna work on it, but basically we'll review with them what our guideline, or sort of what we were evaluating on last year. And if you remember last year, we sent out, I feel like we asked you all to email, some of you did, some of you didn't, comments that you had. I compiled them into an evaluation and went over it with Mary Beth. This will be much more formalized, it is. And we'll come up with questions with the VSBA. You'll get them by form of email. You'll fill it out. They'll then compile it and put something together. It just makes sense. It's how it should operate, and certainly with such a large board. I mean, this
I'll
is
make
the
a motion to approve the superintendent foundation process. So
Evaluation.
Evaluation process, or whatever evaluation. This way we can have a second and then have the discussion.
Second.
No, anyone has their hands up, go ahead.
I just had a question.
Yeah.
Will it be a 360-degree review, meaning will you also get feedback from faculty and other administrators? Like that's how you do it in most organizations? Okay.
Yeah.
So just making sure it wasn't just us evaluating.
So what I can do is I can actually send you a copy, now that we've signed the contract, I can send the board members a copy of the contract so you're aware of what that service includes. Remember, it's confidential information, and we're in the beginning steps of it. Mary Beth is aware that we wanted to do that we felt that it was really important for her to, one, have an evaluation, and for us to be accountable for doing that evaluation well. And that Jennifer, in our experience, we've both experienced it just not happening. And Mary Beth was panicked last year when she went, "Where's my evaluation? Where's my evaluation?"
I think you need to do that.
Yeah, I think you need to do it. It's part of my contract. I'm like, okay. But I think it's going to be really beneficial for our future to be doing things like this. But I will send out a copy of that agreement so you can all see it. So do I have, we want to approve the motion on the table? Ayes?
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. Okay, the motion is passed. Policy.
Okay, this should be
Oh, wow.
really quick, because we've already been through these several times.
Yep.
The first one is legally required, so that one should be really easy. Student freedom of expression and school-sponsored media policy. The proficiency-based graduation requirements, as we mentioned last time, we worked on that with Garen and Sherry, and we basically updated the graduation requirements and merged it with proficiency-based law. And 18-year-old students was one of the ones that we put in the category of the easy to pass policies, because we have to update all of our policies for the people that are new, because we are a new entity. We're going through the big ones and the little ones, and so that one is just something that, as I recall, gives sort of a courtesy to the parents of 18-year-old students, because it will inform them about things unless the student doesn't want them to, because they're legally old enough to do that. So just sort of cleaned up the old policy. What's that?
I thought it was that the note will go out once a child is 18 years old. The parent is the one that will say yes or no.
No, you can see the policy. There's actually the 18-year-old. So the courtesy is the school will make the relationship, but a student can opt out of it as an 18-year-old.
Right. But the policy itself.
Well, there's both. You read it. There's both sides in there. That will, we support and maintain that.
So basically, this is the final read of all of these, and we can adopt tonight each of them if we so choose.
Make a motion that we approve all three.
Do I have a second? Thank you, Will. Any other questions?
I think we already talked about this the last 2 or 3 meetings,
we did.
guys. It's just
All
a
those in
vote.
favor of the motion on the table, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Do I have a motion on the table to adjourn? Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm guessing nobody's opposing. Thank you, everyone.